They had absolutely nothing to do with this man, and yet he still killed both of them anyway. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Janice Morris and Ralph Swain. Viewer discretion is advised. This is probably going to be a shorter video. I don't really have much information about any of the people involved here. I'm feeling a little under the weather as well, so I wanted to still at least be on schedule, but in case it ends up being a really short video, I apologize. Unfortunately, all I really know about Janice Morris is that she was born on January 17th, 1959, and she spent her entire life living in Talladega in Alabama. Ralph Swain was born on January 29th, 1964, and he lived pretty much his entire life in Talladega. Talladega, Alabama, of course, is probably best known for the racetrack. Is that where Talladega Nights took place as well, the movie? I'm assuming so. I can't remember. I've only seen it once. But it is kind of like at least back then, it was a little small city type area. So when this case occurred, Janice and Ralph are dating each other. Janice lives in an apartment, and they live in the City Courts number 2 apartments in Talladega. Janice's next door neighbor is a woman named Geraldine George, and she lived there with her 2 children. Geraldine at the time of this case was 27 years old. Geraldine had been going through a separation. For the past 6 months or so, she had been separated from her husband, and his name is Larry George. He was the father to the 2 children. Geraldine also had a restraining order against him because Larry was a violent guy. He had violent tendencies. He was also extremely belligerent and very verbally abusive. But despite this restraining order, he still continued to stalk her, follow her around, and would harass her. Unfortunately, restraining orders end up just being a piece of paper and not really a great way of protecting a person. He was previously in the Army. It doesn't sound like he was still actively in the Army when this all occurred. While he served, was extremely disobedient. He never followed orders. He always would argue with his commanders, leaders. He was just not someone who was fit to wear the uniform, quite honestly. 24 hours before this case occurred, according to one newspaper article, Geraldine had officially filed for divorce. They had been separated for 6 months, but the divorce really hadn't been a process yet. On February 12th, 1988, Geraldine, who was working at a local Walmart, she got off work sometime a little after 8 p.m., and she would make the drive back to her apartments. Geraldine did not know Janice all that well. They were cordial enough, however, that Geraldine, trusted Janice to babysit her 2 kids, and Janice was more than happy to do so. So on that night, Janice and her boyfriend Ralph were in the apartment watching the 2 kids. When Geraldine came home, she knocked on her door. Janice opened the door. She said, "Oh, the kids are great. Everything went fine." At that point, Geraldine tells the kids to walk next door to their apartment. It's literally like right there. You can see in this recreation that it's like within feet of each other. So it's like Geraldine can see everything, the kids are doing. Geraldine has a brief conversation with Janice. That conversation ended because Janice received a phone call, which turned out to be from her mom. So Geraldine walks back to her apartment, takes literally like 2 seconds. And when she enters the apartment, she sees her ex-husband, Larry, sitting there with the 2 kids. He is talking with them. He has them kind of propped up on his lap or next to him. Geraldine's like, "What are you doing in here? You cannot be in here. You have got to get out." He said, "I'm just visiting the kids. They're my kids." She said, "Well, you're not allowed to be here because of the restraining order. I'm going to call the police." According to Geraldine, Larry began to berate her and saying, "Well, where have you been all night? Where were you?" She's like, "I've been at work. I have a job." "Well, how come the kids were with these strangers next door?" She's like, "They're not strangers. I know them. I know them well enough. I trust them to watch the kids." And that's what they did. He screamed at her, "I don't want those people to ever watch my kids ever again." And she's like, "No, you're not going to do this. Like, You don't control me. Definitely, you don't control me anymore, like you think you used to control me. You don't own me. You can't tell me what to do with my children. You can't tell me that I can't have them be babysat by someone while I go to work. And so at that point, he pulls out a World War II German Luger, a gun, and he begins to wave it around in front of Geraldine. She then tells the kids, go to your rooms, please, right now, and call your grandpa. Tell him to come here immediately, and to also call the police. So the two kids begin to walk away. And then at that point, Larry follows the kids. Geraldine's like, she begins to scream, like, don't follow them, leave them, she tries to like pull him away from the kids, but he shoves her back. He then runs to the room where his daughter is trying to call the grandpa. He takes the phone and he rips it right out of the wall, and he takes the cord. So she is now terrified, Geraldine. And so she runs right next door to Janice. She bangs on the door, and then I think she just opens the door saying, Janice, please, you got to call the cops. Janice was still on the call with her mom, and she's like, what do you mean? What's going on? And she says, please call the cops. My ex-husband's here. He's going to hurt us. And so Janice tells her mom, hey, I gotta go real quick. I gotta do something. I'll call you right back. She hangs up the phone, and sadly, that's the last time Janice's mom would ever hear her daughter's voice. Larry, at this point, then gets to the front door of Janice's apartment. He takes the gun, he points it straight up, and he pulls the trigger, firing a warning shot, apparently as some way of scaring them. He then bursts into the apartment, and he walks up to the doorway of the kitchen where Janice was, and she had no other way of getting out. That was the only way in and out of the kitchen. He then lifts his gun up with just very matter-of-factly, didn't hesitate, lifts it up, and he fires a round directly into Janice's chest. Ralph Swain, the boyfriend, he was actually upstairs, and he ran down once he heard all the commotion. And the moment he was seen by Larry, Larry grabbed him by his shirt and turned him around and threw him down on the stairs. He then took the gun and pointed it to the back of Ralph's head, and he pulled the trigger, shooting Ralph once through his head. He then takes his ex-wife, he takes Geraldine, and he throws her against a wall where she falls down on the ground, points the gun at her, and fires a round into her as well. And by the way, Janice herself, she had 2 kids. Her 2 children were in the apartment, and they literally witnessed their mother and their mother's boyfriend and this other woman, Geraldine. They witnessed them all get shot. They saw their mother's death. According to witnesses, many people saw Larry George calmly walk out of Janice's apartment, and he just calmly got into his car, didn't hesitate, didn't seem nervous or anything. Turned the car on and he left. Fire and rescue would arrive within minutes, and at that point, obviously, Larry is gone. They are able to piece together who was responsible for this and what happened. I think the kids played a big part in kind of explaining what they knew happened. All 3 individuals were rushed to the hospital. Geraldine would survive her gunshot, but unfortunately, she would be paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of her life. Janice was pronounced dead at arrival at the hospital. Ralph was still alive, but not conscious, and they operated on him, but unfortunately, he also would pass away. Janice and Ralph both died at the hands of a man who had nothing to do with this couple whatsoever. They were just simply at the right place because it was their apartment, but at the worst possible time. When detectives were piecing this together, they're like, what? This is an absolutely moronic murder. This was so dumb. He didn't go there to kill Janice and Ralph. He didn't even know them. He never even met them before. But they were the ones who ended up dying in all of this. So they put out an APB, be on the lookout, or whatever it was, for Larry George. They put his image on the news, in the newspapers. The following day, they actually find police are contacted because there was a little campfire that had just been put out. And police go there, and the fire was still kind of smoking a little bit. They realized this was a very makeshift little campsite, and right next to it was a car. It was a 1975 Mercury Cougar which was the same car that Larry George drove. This was his car. He was in this location, and he was camping there probably the night before after he left the murder scene. He then ditched his car. The car yielded really no evidence other than it had some of his camouflage clothing that he used to wear for when he was in the army, which they determined through witnesses that he was actually wearing it when the murders happened. But Larry was nowhere to be found. He was not anywhere near the scene. And then within a day or so, they search a local college campus there. They actually have the college close or cancel all of their classes because police had gotten some tips and some information that people had seen Larry either on the campus or right outside of it. And given the fact that he murdered 2 innocent people who he didn't even know so coldly and so calmly, he was clearly a threat to everyone, and he was armed. So they evacuated the school. They searched the school from top to bottom, side to side. They found no trace of Larry. As the days and the weeks go by, as they're investigating this and trying to find Larry, they're finding out, obviously at a point where it's already too late to go get him, that he had gone back to his hometown, which was in Brewton, Alabama. But by the time police got there, he was gone. They also found out that he had a sister in southern Alabama. They went there. He was there at one point, but then by the time they got there, he was gone. They then had sightings of him in other states, like Georgia, Florida. He had clearly been on the run, and he was trying to get somewhere. Their investigation eventually leads them to Roanoke in Virginia, and they actually find another little makeshift campsite, and this time it actually had some of Larry's belongings, so now they know for a fact that he was at this campsite. However, Larry was nowhere to be found, and he never came back to that campsite. He was still on the run. As they are alerting various states, they're calling him a gun fanatic. This guy, he did own a lot of guns. They just didn't find any of those guns as they were searching for him. But a man with that many guns, and not just like pistols and stuff like that, he owned assault weapons and stuff like that. He owned lots of giant knives. He was an outdoorsman, he was described as. He was someone who could survive and thrive in the wilderness, and he could probably make himself hidden if need be, which is what he was able to do for quite some time. But they made sure that his face, his image, was put all over the news, not only in Alabama, but in Virginia, where they found his stuff, in Georgia, in Florida. Just, if anyone sees him, please call, but don't approach him. He is a very dangerous person who will kill without thinking. His case ends up being aired on Unsolved Mysteries and also on America's Most Wanted. And on April 24th, 1994, a couple of days after a re-airing of this story, police got a big tip. This time it brought them to Delaware, specifically in Wilmington. Multiple people had seen a man that fit Larry's description camping and fishing near the banks of the Christina River in Wilmington. When police arrive, unbelievably, they find Larry there, and he is just sort of chilling. He is living his life in the woods, and it sounds like they caught him by surprise. He was not expecting this. Now, they had not identified themselves as police officers right away, and so they were kind of trying to fish some answers out of him. Haha, pun intended. They're like, hey, show us what kind of fishing poles you have and stuff like that. And they were just trying to getting him to relax and just sort of open up. And then at one point, Larry notices the 2 officers. They look at each other a certain way that really gave off a red flag to Larry, like, oh shit, these are cops. And so at that point, they do reveal themselves as officers. He then attacks them, not with a gun or anything, but he charges at them, and there's a fight between all 3 of them, and it takes them to the ground. They're struggling to subdue Larry. At a certain point, one of them has him, Larry, and they just throw him into the nearby water. But they are able to finally corner him and apprehend him, and they place cuffs on him and announce that he is arrested and charged with the double homicide and the attempted murder of his ex-wife. They had to make absolutely sure it was him. They did take his fingerprints, and they confirmed quickly that this, in fact, was Larry George. He was extradited back to Alabama, where he would have to face the music for what he did. While that's going on, they're searching his new campsite where they arrested him, and this campsite was much bigger. You can see images here of this is how he was living. These are the things they found there. Amongst all of his belongings were several guns, knives, other weapons. Obviously, a very dangerous person. They don't know if he was planning to live the rest of his days like this or if he was planning something. And that also kind of goes back to Geraldine, because she was petrified forever that he was going to come back and finish what he started and kill her and maybe kill the kids. You know, she didn't know. But thankfully, he never did. And he goes on trial in 1994. This was in November. They were going to be going for the death penalty for Larry because of his actions were so cold and without remorse as well. He's never apologized. Everyone knew he did it. He was definitely the guilty party, but he was just such an evil guy. Like, he just was evil. He killed these two strangers without hesitating. It was nothing to him. And he did so in front of the victims' children. After a very, very brief time, I'm talking like an hour or so, the jury comes back with a verdict. Larry George is found guilty of the 2 counts of murder, capital murder, and guilty of the charge of attempted murder. The jury would recommend the death penalty, and the judge would end up upholding that, and he was officially sentenced to death. Throughout the years, Larry has continued to appeal his conviction, all to no success. His appeals were based off of just really stupid reasons. Like, the defense attorney in their closing argument said some things that weren't really nice about me. Like, what? That's grasping at straws to find some way to get this overturned, but it was just so dumb. Like, there was just no way. This was a rock solid case. There were witnesses. The children saw this all happen. It was him. Like, there's just no denying it. In 2020, on Christmas Day, sadly, Geraldine passed away. But at least she got to see the man who caused her so much grief and trauma get locked up forever and, be sentenced to death. But she didn't get to see his death sentence carried out. As far as I could tell, I've looked into his inmate records, and as far as I can see, Larry George is still on death row in Alabama. Again, he was convicted in 1994. It's 2025 now. This is a common thing here in the United States. People are sentenced to death and they wait decades and decades to be actually executed. Back in the early days of the death penalty, people were executed within like a year. Now it's years and years. And obviously that's because the appeals process is more involved. And also you need to make absolutely sure that you have the right person, because unfortunately we have executed innocent people that we don't know they're innocent until after they've been executed. We currently have innocent people right now on death row who are still about to be executed. So I think one of the reasons why it takes a lot longer now is because they need to make sure that the appeals process is completely exhausted and that any possibility of having an innocent person on death row is investigated for the most part. But obviously a lot still slipped through the cracks. But, one day Larry George is going to be executed. And if not, he's going to die in a prison cell. He's never seeing the light of day again. He will never breathe free air again. He murdered 2 people, tried to murder a third, and he did so calmly, coldly, with calculation, without any hesitation, without any remorse. He seems to be proud, almost, of what he did, traumatizing his own children in the process, scaring them, thinking that he might come back for them before he was caught. He's a monster. And he's exactly where he needs to be. And in the end, Janice Morris and Ralph Swain got the justice they both very rightfully deserve. But that is it for this case. True crime, Rooney, Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you're new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously, so please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Hit the bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. Drop a like, leave a comment, so that way more people can see the videos. I also tell short-form true crime stories over on TikTok. The links to my TikToks are in the link tree in the description of this video below and in all of my videos, so feel free to follow that if you want. And then lastly, in that link tree, you'll also find my case list. The list is over 7,500 names. If you scroll through the list, which you can do if you want to, it's alphabetical for the most part, and you don't see a name on there that you would like me to cover, send me a quick email. My email is also listed below. All I need to know is the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add it to my list. I pick cases I cover typically at random. However, if you are a direct loved one to a missing or murdered person, maybe it's an unsolved cold case, or maybe you just want their story told, even if the case has been solved, just let me know in the email that you are a family member, and I can make sure that that case gets a higher priority. But that is it for this video, True Crime Aroonies. So until the next case, ta-ta for now.